there, or there's a lot of different interpretations of the equal right, the ERA Prop 1. So my first thing is for anybody that hasn't voted yet, I would just recommend you read it. You go in, you look at it, you read it, you understand it, go to a non-biased news source for either side, and make sure you just understand what it is, right? And for anyone unfamiliar, Proposition 1, you can probably pull it up on your phone now if you want the exact language, but it protects classes of individuals that hadn't been protected in the New York State Constitution previously. And those classes of individuals sometimes now get discriminated against or violence against. So in my opinion, those are, we're just kind of going forward here in a time where those classes of individuals didn't really have a second thought back when the Constitution was first written. So now we've added them. And I think if there's, and the last thing I'll say is there's some people that think, it could cause some issues with either parental rights or some other things. And if those specific scenarios come up that I think a lot of people have talked about, they'll go to the judiciary like anything else to decide if that makes sense or not, because that's not the intention of the proposition. And then a judge, like a lot of times, will decide if that makes sense. So yes, I think it's important that everybody understands it, that everybody reads it, and that they understand that it's protecting a class, multiple different classes that were not protected previously.
Thank you. Mr. Griffo, your response, please.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. First of all, I have proposed legislation that would make language more concise, because I think too often we see referendum that are being offered to the people where they can't understand or digest everything that's in it. I used an illustration earlier today about gaming. When the gaming legislation came before the public, it was, do you want to put more money into education? Do you want to see more jobs in New York? Who's going to say no to anything like that? I want more money in education, more jobs. And so I think concise and clear language is very important. It doesn't exist. The reason it does exist, I don't have the faith and confidence that James is talking about in people making subjective and interpretive decisions on this. From what I see in this right now, there are a number of concerns I have, because it potentially would be giving taxpayer benefits to non-citizens. It would be encroaching on parents' rights, and it really would be giving a biological opportunity for biological men to compete in girls' sports. Those are the things that, well, you know what, you can disagree, but you can read this, and I'm not going to allow anybody to make subjective or interpretive decisions. I think the people of New York deserve a clear and concise understanding of what the legislature is proposing before the people of the state of New York to put in our Constitution. And I don't believe this does that. And for that reason, I don't support it. I support equal rights. I don't support special rights. And I think that's what we're getting right now. And that's why I think there's a concern here, and why we need more opportunity to really delineate and to clearly define what you're intending to try to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Griffo. Other questions from the floor, please? Questions? Ms. Warden, you'll be back.
Just wanted to make a comment.
Is there a question?
Well, and possibly, if you question it, my father always said, and he was a very avid reader with history and everything, and he always said, read between the lines.
Good. Thank you.
I need to say no more.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, my question really, I think, well, it's to both of you, but this is the first year of campaign finance reform where there's been matching funds for, candidates. So my question to Mr. Griffo, what was your vote on that, and why? And then I guess, Mr. Meyers, what would you have voted on that?
Right, so Mr. Griffo, please respond, and then
Sure.
That turned on.
It's on. So I was opposed, but I'm participating in it because I'm not going to give somebody an advantage over me. I will work to change rules until the rules have changed. I'll play by the rules that exist. I believe it's wrong to use taxpayer dollars. When you're talking about the cost that everybody has, I consider this welfare for politicians. And everybody says, well, this is going to make it more fair or equal elections. That's not true. When I first ran for office, I had to raise my own money. I didn't have, I didn't go to the taxpayers and things of that nature. So the advantage of incumbency that people use is just, it's really not an advantage. It's how you work to raise that money. People all start somewhere, and if the people believe in you, support you, and elect you, then you hold the office. I always believe you run as a candidate on a particular political party, but when you hold office, you're a government official, and you don't, look at things purely politically. You're looking at it from a perspective of how do you serve people. But in this particular instance, I didn't believe it was the right way to go. I don't believe that we should have almost $1 billion in the budget to spend on political campaigns when, and in New York City, where they got this idea from, it's a failure. I mean, you got the mayor that's going to be indicted pretty soon. So this isn't making it fairer. Isn't making it more what's legal in the sense that people, it's not subjecting people to more ethical behavior, because you still find that people are taking and abusing this in the city of New York at this point in time. And that's what they used as a model for this particular one. Even California, one of the more liberal states in our nation, doesn't have this. So I just think it was wrong, but yes, we are participating
But
now.
you are participating in that.
I just said that to you.
Yes, so.
And I said the reason is
You
because,
voted against it, but you're doing it, okay.
well, I voted against it, but I'm not gonna give somebody an opportunity to have a superior advantage. Because I also believe if you've ever played sports in your life, you know that you go into something to compete.
Mr. Meyers, go ahead, please, Chair.
Thanks for the question. So a couple things with it. I would have voted for it, and that's because, as Mr. Senator Griffo stated, but I think my opinion's a little different. When you come into this as a new candidate, I didn't have any wealthy anybody, right? So I came in with nothing. I came in with $0. And this is public information. Senator Griffo came into the race with around $700,000. But then he was able to maximize the public campaign finance reform and now has $1 million to spend against me. When no matter what I raised, my maximum was $375,000. So I think it's a little unfair to say that that would have been unfair, right? Because he would have came in with way more than me either way. And then he just used 300,000 or up to 375,000, I believe he maxed it out or got close, to spend of taxpayer dollars that he voted against. And I'll also give an example. I'm very close with Marianne Buttonshaw, and we disagreed on this topic on if we should use it or not. And she voted no, and she decided not, and she did not use it because she voted no. She's very principled in that aspect. So in my mind, if I voted no, I wouldn't have used it. If I voted yes, which I would have used it, because it's just not, I mean, it does help level the playing field. For someone new, when you're there for 20 years, 18 years, since 2007, you're able to amass a lot of money. And you've had no challenger the entire time. So how would someone like me compete? I know you had a challenger in 2010. It's true. So sorry, I misspoke. But mostly unopposed the whole time, so hasn't had to spend a lot of money. To me, it's a little bit, contradictory, to say the least, to what my opponent said. But yes, I would use it. It's helped me a lot because I've now been able to get my message out in a way I would not have been able to get my message out otherwise. So that's my answer.
Excellent, thank you.
Last night, President Trump floated a kind of a unique idea about giving a tax credit for family members that are assisting in taking care of an elderly family member. Now, I know on a county level, we spend about $194 million, big portion of our budget on elderly and social services, and sometimes I wonder what kind of job we're doing. So this is kind of a new idea thrown out, and wanted to hear your thoughts about it. Tax credit.
Mr. Meyers, you go first. Mr. Griffo, you respond.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I like that idea. I think that, we have a lot of people that take care of their either their elderly parents or sick parents, which, when I moved back, I had to help take care of my mom some, my best friend, which is crazy. Which maybe we talk about cancer at some point and how it's just, we need to do a little bit more to try to eradicate it. I think they have been at the federal level. It's my very best friend from growing up. We're the exact same age. We've gone through all of life together. His mom just passed away from cancer as well this year, and he had to work. He quit his job and he worked with her for many, many months, lived with her and took care of her. And he was able to get some money from New York State to do that now, which was actually great. But a tax credit, yes, why not? Because that's another way that people can, help take care, and it could probably save us some money in the long term. With how expensive actual healthcare is right now, going to the emergency room or staying in a hospital long term. If you can stay home and have a family member take care of you, that's going to save us money in the long term, no matter how much it. I can't imagine a tax credit would put us in more of a deficit than the amount of money we spend on healthcare in someone full-time being in a hospital.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Griffo.
We're seeing more and more individuals want to be at home and take care of a family member at home. I mean, that was the tradition for so long, where you were there to support your family. And so I think this proposal, I've not had an opportunity to look at it. Obviously, I always believe that you should study something, review it, and make an informed, intelligent decision on a vote, get input. But I like the concept. I think it would work and be moving in the right direction of what you're seeing more, keeping people out of healthcare institutions, nursing homes, things of that nature. So if we can do something to provide direct family care, direct home care, I'm interested and willing to look at that and to generally at this point, concept support that.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Griffo. I think we have questions in back.
Yes, my name is Ingrid Quiseno. Nice to see you all here. My question is, in North Utica, almost every night there are from 200 to 300 homeless that are sleeping in the hotels in our area. And if they're not sleeping in the hotels in our area, then they're sleeping in the streets in the rest of Utica. I want to know, Mr. Griffo, what have you done to lessen the homelessness in Oneida County, especially in Utica? And James, what will you do to help us with this issue?
Okay, so Mr. Griffo, obviously you go first.
So I think the homelessness issue has become something pervasive, and I think it has to be attacked from a variety of perspectives. And the state has begun to put more resources into mental health care, mental health services, which I think is important. And we're starting to see more of a consensus there. There also is more affordable housing initiatives and programs and grants that are now becoming available, working with organizations. You see that at the Olmsted here in Utica, where Department of Housing and Community Renewal has an investment, as well as the federal government. All of that, I think, is important as you begin to provide opportunity. But you also have to look at it, and I think the city of Rome is doing this now, and I believe the city of Utica is looking likewise, as to this has to be a multifaceted approach. While we have to provide housing, mental health services, you also have to ensure the safety of the neighborhoods and the individuals, both living in those neighborhoods and those who are finding themselves in a difficult situation. And I've seen the city of Rome propose a number of pieces of legislation that I believe will be helpful in trying to eradicate some of this, including instead of arresting people or trying to push people out, but to put them into a court system where they can then direct them into appropriate care and treatment facilities of the programs that are available presently here from a social service perspective, from a mental health perspective. And I think that is all the important things that we can do right now. There have been a number of just feel-good handout type programs, but I think what we need to do, if we look at this comprehensively, you're beginning to see some of that initiative and funding from federal and state governments, but I think particularly here locally also, when you identify a problem and try to eradicate some of that, there's going to be a variety of local issues that have to be brought into this equation. And as I said, the city of Rome, this court type of process that you're talking about, similar to what they had drug courts and everything, a specific court where people would be brought in and then can be directed to the appropriate care and service that they may be eligible for and available to them. I think that's a good way, and also to ensure that we keep the streets safe too.
Mr. Meyers, your response, please.
Thanks for the question. So I think there's a couple things. I think one is there's not enough places for these people to go. So low barrier shelters are what a lot of them are called. And those are places where people can go, and it's I mean, we all know what the weather's going to be like in 2, 3, 4 months, right? None of us would want to be on the street. And I think that the state can do a little bit more. I actually agree with a few things that the senator said. The state has the ability, one, to look at some of these unused sites. There's some buildings that are state facilities that we got rid of, I think, that used to be used at some time for different psychiatric facilities and other things. Those can be places that we can help start rehabilitate and get people. Some people just literally need, information on how to put how to if they've been out of home for so long. A lot of times they need help with, how would they go to a job interview? How would they, do some of these things that I know everybody wants them to work, and I think most of them probably would want to too. So I think we can do a little bit more to help. And mental health is a huge, again, that's one of the things I think we agree on. The state can do a lot more with mental health. And not every homeless person has a mental health challenge, but I think it would do a lot to start helping the problem. So there's just not enough resources being put into mental health, starting from schools, and clinicians in schools, all the way from elementary level up through. And then most insurance companies, don't accept. It's too expensive for mental health care needs to be much more accessible, and it's not. So making sure that that's a budget, something in the budget that we fight for is really important to me. And for example, there was increase in mental health funding in the last budget, but just as a point, the budget's divided up into many different amendments, 10 different amendments. They all have different things in them. And when I would look at the budget, because I've had to for my job, you look at each one and say, is this a good idea? Is this not a good idea, right? Something with mental health, to me, you got to look at the specifics, but probably a good idea. I know that my opponent, for example, voted against every single budget amendment in the budget, right? So some of that was mental health funding, some of that was public safety funding, some of that was other things. But it's a democratically passed budget, so I think the response from a lot of the other side is you always just say no to all the amendments. But to me, no, you say no to the ones that make sense and you say yes to the ones that make sense. I probably wouldn't vote yes on all of them. I probably wouldn't vote no on all of them. But I would look, and if it included things for mental health, things for people that, to go, and I would fight for those things to be in there, those are things I would vote yes on. So I think there's, multiple things the state can do. Those are some.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Meyers.
So, for both of you, for Senator Griffo, what have you done, and for Mr. Meyers, what will you do or try to do regarding climate change and specifically the CLCPA, which was passed a few years ago, but has not actually managed to go anywhere since then?
Is it me or him?
It's Mr. Meyers first.
Thanks for the question. So, we talked about this a little bit because there's some things that the state is doing that we need to get there, right? So the CLCPA has goals, and those are goals for a reason. They're goals because they're things that we hope to get to help, to help the environment. We all see that there's been issues with the climate. There's a tornado in Rome that I know the state senator knows just as well. You had to work. I was up there the day after giving out food to people and doing best I could. He was working with the government because he was in that position to do that, right? We're looking at some different, it's going to be 76 degrees on Halloween, right? So obviously, the climate, it's a little different. Some of these hurricanes are stronger than they've ever been. Now, we got to make sure it makes sense. And I mean this because I know we can't go too fast. I do. And I know that there's businesses that have issues with some of the issues here with moving too fast. I do. The electric school bus mandate right now is unsustainable. Let's get there eventually. We should. It's important. And that's one of the things that we need to look at and get to. The grid needs to be updated, so we'll get some jobs from that. We need to make sure that the schools can afford it because they can't. So if it's going to be a mandate that's funded, it needs to be a funded mandate. It needs to be something that the state puts money behind, right? Because the rural school districts can't handle it. And I've talked to people that know what they're talking about that. We need to get there though, and we can. We just have to do it in a way that makes sense. And the last thing I'll say is, and I've talked about this for all different types of issues from from crime to climate. I'm not the expert on anything, right? I mean, we all have a little bit of knowledge in every subject, but there's people that are experts on everything. And I don't think enough that we bring in the experts, a representative from who's a stakeholder from each of these things, a stakeholder from the business community, a stakeholder from the schools, a stakeholder that's a climate scientist, all of them. You bring them in a room and you say, what's the impact upstate New York? What's the impact, what are the pros and cons of what we're doing here? And I will do that for each issue we're talking about. Crime too, because we're not talking about bail reform and stuff, but like I sat down with the sheriff for well over an hour and we talked about issues like that need to be fixed. And one of the biggest issue that he had with something like bail reform was that sheriffs and law enforcement weren't brought into the conversation when it was being devised, right? And the experts need to be. So all I can say is we got to get there because there's clearly a problem. But let's make sure we're doing it smart and let's bring in all the experts and make sure. And I will vote on what makes sense, and I'll vote on if it doesn't make sense, I won't. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Griffo, your response.
So this is a complex project, right? When you talk about budget, they're not amendments, they're budget bills. There are about 10 budget bills, and they're all a variety of subject matters. So it's not that simple to say, well, this line is going to come out. There's no line item veto for the governor or any member of the legislature in that regard. So you're voting on a whole package of bills, and then you have to weigh that relative to whether or not it's good policy or a bad process, bad policy, then it becomes a bad budget. And yes, that's when you don't support something. Not on politics, but when you're on an unsustainable spending spree, when the people of the state of New York can no longer afford to live here and are leaving in droves, I think that speaks volumes. When 68% of the people of the state of New York say they're headed in the wrong direction, that's a reflection of the majority that wants to join, because that's what they've done over the last 5 years. And climate is just another illustration of that. And I told you before, there are ways to protect this environment and to grow this economy, but it's not with unrealistic goals and timetables. They refuse to listen. They want to ban gas stoves. They want you not to have access. They want the price tag on the electric buses, I told you, is $20 billion. It's going to bankrupt the state of New York, just on one particular item. You talk about affordability. So yes, you can embrace clean energy, but you can do it in a reasonable way, in a realistic timetable, as I said. And none of this is realistic or reasonable right now. Now, the only reason they may back off is because they're feeling the heat, no pun intended, of the public. The public are saying enough is enough. We're not going to accept this anymore. So they're worried about losing seats in politics. And as a result of that, they're starting to put the hold, let's put this on hold for right now, but beware of these guys. Beware of wolves wearing sheep clothes. Beware of them, because right now they'll tell you everything you want to hear. But then when they're there, just look at what they've done over the last 5 years. They're going to bankrupt the state. And when I was chairman of the Energy Committee, I preached in a diversified energy portfolio. There's nothing wrong with investing. Right now, you know how much tax dollars are going into solar and wind? It doesn't stand on its own right now. It's being heavily subsidized by your tax dollars. So in the end, what we need to do is, yes, let's look at solar and wind. And wait a minute, if we're going to look at clean energy, why not nuclear? But if you talk to the guys on the other side, well, no nuclear, we can't do that. They closed Indian Point. So, I mean, that's the problem right now. They won't look at everything. It's just one particular segment of whatever meets their political ideology or political philosophy. That's what they're moving in. I was raised that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I don't know why a diversified portfolio where you have some level of fossil fuel and you still have solar, wind, where we're looking at nuclear, hydro, we look at everything and everything becomes a part of that. And we move in a direction that is reasonable and realistic and affordable. So that's what's not happening with the CLCPA right now.
Excellent, thank you. It's about 7:45. We're going to take one more question, and then you'll do your final closing remarks, and then we'll close the formal portion of the session, and then you can engage with the candidates after that. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Brian Rubarski. I'm the chairman of a Second Amendment advocacy group here in Herkimer County called SCOPE. It stands for Shooters Committee on Political Education. And at the moment, I'm researching about 35 anti-gun bills that Governor Hochul has in New York State. And outside of California, New York State is probably the most egregious state that's anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment. And most of the bills are all sponsored by Democrats coming out of New York City in the tri-state area. And I just would like to get your feeling on where you both stand on the Second Amendment.
Mr. Griffo, and then Mr. Meyers will respond.
So I've been a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I again believe that we can approach safety in our communities and the state in a lot of different ways. It's looking at some of the gun issues and the impact it has on a community. It is looking, and you've seen some things that people can work together on. It's mental health services, because when you look at some of the people that are committing some of these crimes, there are obvious reasons behind that that really trigger this. It's about getting the illegal guns off the street. If we put more of an effort there. So I did not support the SAFE Act, and I don't believe the SAFE Act has made New York any safer. What it's done is put restrictions on law-abiding citizens. The law-abiding citizen now is restricted in what it can do or what it can possess and where they can possess that. And many of these cases are now being fought in the courts. And I just don't believe that we're approaching it the right way. And again, it's just a quick stopgap measure, just like violence in the schools. We need to continue to protect our schools. We need to put school resource officers in there. We need to harden the facilities. We need to recognize what's taking place and find ways to confront that as well as to deal with it. So I just think at this point in time, the legislation that are being proposed are people's opinions and philosophy. I don't believe it's really, if you look at statistics, it's not really having the impact or the effect that they had purported that it would, except to make it more difficult for law-abiding citizens to be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, yeah, as a military guy, I understand and know my fair share of firing weapons, right? You have to qualify every year on the M16 on the range. Completely get what using a weapon safely is all about. And I've had plenty of family members that are all hunters, all of these things. So I just want to, and the Democrats sometimes get a bad rap, right? We're all, no idea what a gun is. I think, that's not always the case, right? So, but what I do think is my opponent mentioned mental health. And I think that's one of the problems. So we got to make sure that some of these laws that have been proposed in a lot of places, like red flag laws, all that does is make sure that somebody that, when we looked at a lot of these mass shootings in other states, a lot of times people always say, oh man, like we should have realized because this guy did this, or this beforehand, right? Either what he posted online, what he was saying to his friends, all these things that a lot of times the design of a red flag law is to make sure something like that gets caught. So I do think that there are reasonable things like that don't infringe, background check. We all get background checks for, as a military guy, I've gone through 1 million background checks, right? For all types of stuff, to get a security clearance and whatnot. To buy a car, you gotta be licensed. So no, I don't want to take any law-abiding citizens' guns at all, right? We need hunters, we need sportsmen, all of these things. I think the answer is that we make sure they're not falling into the hands of the people that they shouldn't be. And like I just mentioned, there's a lot of ways to make sure that doesn't happen. And then there is still, of course, there's still violence in the state. And I'll mention one more time, when I sat down with Sheriff Mashel, for example, the answer is super multifaceted, right? The answer is there's things to do about ghost guns. That's a huge problem. 3D printers now can print guns, right? So there's an issue that I need to bring, again, the experts in and figure out the best way to handle that, because that's not sustainable. Some guy got caught, a younger, I think a teenage, age, that was printing guns and selling them, right? That's crazy. We need to make sure that something is done for that. We can't have that happen, right? So making sure that we're doing all those types of things that, don't infringe on law-abiding Second Amendment rights for citizens, but making sure that the guns don't fall in the hands of the people that they shouldn't is best we can. And I think that there's a lot of ways we can, like I just mentioned, so.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
Senator Griffo, you'll be doing your closing statement first, and then Mr. Meyers, you'll be doing yours second. Oh, you want to do the raffle first? Okay, all right.
Now for the important stuff.
All right.
Joe Beatrice still here?
Yeah. All right,
He
so,
bought a ticket.
the winner of our 50-50 raffle tonight is going to be 512666.
You know, I never saw.
I don't know. 512666.
Keep it here. Put it all back for North. I want it.
You gotta get the shirt up. All right, excellent. So it was donated to Alyssa for bringing this beautiful structure report. So thank you, Mr. Alyssa. We appreciate it. All right, gentlemen. So your closing argument, Senator Griffo will go first, and then Mr. Meyers will go second.
Yeah, all I'm going to do is say thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for having an interest in our government, because I think it's important that citizens are involved and engaged. And I thank all the candidates, including James, who come forward and present themselves, because it isn't an easy thing, and a lot of things go on in the political world and realm right now that I don't normally think is really good for society, but that's what happens when you see distortions and misrepresentations and the negative ads. We've tried to continue to keep our campaign very positive this year, to talk about who we are and what we've done and what we'd like to do. And I told you what we've done. I've continued to work to be very available, very accessible to you. We continue to listen to our constituents. We continue to deal with many problems that our constituents are facing. We try to support and to introduce and to pass legislation of both local need and concern, as well as with those that may have statewide implications. And we try to continue to advocate and to deliver the resources, which we have done successfully in both the majority and the minority. So I think that we have and will continue to provide the best service possible to the people that I represent, because I believe it's been an honor and a privilege to have earned your support and to have served and represented you. And I have the energy, I have the skill set, and I have the ability and knowledge to know where to go and what to do and who to get to. And it was evidenced by some of the major department heads that we brought here today over the last few months: the Commissioner of Corrections, the head of the State Liquor Authority, the Superintendent of State Police. I mean, we're bringing the major players here to make sure that they are familiar and understand what the needs are in this community. And I'm proud of the role I had in redeveloping Griffiths. When you talk about economic opportunity, thanks to many of the efforts and the initiatives that we put forth, to the work that we did collaboratively with the county executive, with my colleagues in state government, with former governors, we have been able, with Steve DeMille, God rest his soul, we have been able to invest and to grow that park into what it is today, so that we can recruit young people like James to come to work in this area. And appreciate that. I know you left this year, so hopefully they'll hire you back. So, but that's what's.
They won't need to, Joe. They won't need to.
So, and we brought Wolfspeed here, and we brought Danfoss here. So we're creating, what we've tried to do is to position ourselves to take advantage of emerging economic opportunities, whether it's in drones or in quantum research. These are the things that I've worked on, working collaboratively to try to position this community so that we're creating opportunity to retain our young people and to provide a future for all. So that's who I am, what I am. You can disagree with me, but I've always, on issues, but I've always respected that difference of opinion, and I continue. And the one thing we have said equally, and I've said this from the very beginning, when you're trying to develop policy, you need to talk to the people that has an impact as a result of that policy. When they did bail in Albany, they didn't talk the majority to the sheriffs, to the DAs, to the criminal defense attorneys, or the public defenders. So those are the kind of things we have to do to get their perspective on the ground in order to get a better policy in place for the people of State of the Art. So again, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve you, and hopefully I will have that opportunity again in another week. Thank you.
Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again for doing this. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Senator Griffo, for doing this with me. Yeah, you know, I just harken back a little bit to what I said in the beginning to introduce myself to you folks, right? I come at this with a different perspective. I come at this with somebody that hasn't worked in politics my entire life, that hasn't been in Albany ever, right? Because I can look at it from a private sector perspective that I did for the last 9 years. I can look at it from the military perspective that, and I don't think I mentioned this because it's not super important, but you know, I still serve in the Army Reserve. I'm a major in the Army Reserve. That's my part-time job, and service is super important to me, right? And like, this is the next way I can do that. And again, I will look at things independently, right? I'm not going to be lumped in one side or the other. My job is not to do that. The job is to represent upstate New York. And upstate New York has a lot of unique things about it, as we all know, and why we love it, right? My favorite place on the planet is the Adirondacks and the surrounding areas, because it's just, we all know how beautiful it is, right? And it's like one of the best places to live in the country. Let's keep it that way. And let's make sure our kids and grandkids want to be here. And the way we do that is, the way I can do that is being part of a majority where I can actually have some outside influence that people in the minority just can't have, from what I've been told. You're in the room when the budget negotiations are happening. You're working with someone like a Marianne Buttonshaw, who's in the majority, who can deliver for this area. And you can actually start to maybe make some changes to these people that only focus on downstate. Because upstate matters, and making sure we're fighting for upstate matters. And I can do that as part of the majority in a way that someone in the minority just can't. And the last thing I'll say is, I've really enjoyed I've learned a ton over the last 9 months. I've really, sometimes it feels like we just started this, or then, anything, 9 months feels like forever, but I've tried to talk to everyone. I never knew there was so many parades until I ran for office. And I know Senator Griffo's been in a lot of them too. I went to everyone I could. All 3.5 counties, and I don't know if we mentioned, I think most people may know this, but the district is very big. It's all of Oneida County, all of Madison County, northern Chenango County, and 3 towns in Herkimer County. They can't make the lines easy, right? So I went to a parade in every one of those counties, and including Chenango, right, Norwich. And sometimes those people, when they, there's a lot of people that aren't, right now the vitriol is so high at the national level. It shouldn't be down here, and it's not. I've talked to people that are ardent supporters of the other party that I'm not in, at the federal level, that they're going to support Donald Trump. To me, but they also said they're going to support me, because to them, it's about what we can do at a local level, and it's not about partisan politics and what's going on at the federal level. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't. It matters, right? And go vote for the president, right? It matters. But our needs here are so much different. And I've learned that from talking to people all across the state. I've learned that from being in all these parades. And I've, shaken a lot of hands, all of that. And what people have told me is they're sick and tired of the same old, same old. So if you want somebody that's not the same old, and you want to not do the same thing over and over, what's that saying? You do the same thing over and over again, and I'm not the same thing. Somebody different, and come and look at it differently. So give me a shot. I'd appreciate that. And if you're going to vote, please vote for me. Thank you.
So I would just like to thank Senator Griffo and Mr. Meyers for being so gracious with their time tonight. And again, their campaign material is here out on the table. So if you do have any follow-on questions, either you can send them to the North Buchan Neighborhood Association. We'll make sure the respective candidate receives that, or please feel free to reach out to them directly. I know, what's that? Eat. Yeah, make sure you guys eat all the refreshments that were brought tonight. But thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you guys participating. The formal portion of the meeting is over. If anybody wants snippets of the video, it is on YouTube under North Utica Neighborhood Association. Thank you.
Ask me about